on the topic of Afghanistan, had always argued that we should have done a punitive expedition. Go in there, kill who you need to kill, destroy what you need to destroy, and leave. And if they come back, you do it again, but you do not occupy.
Oh, no, absolutely. And there's nothing to occupy. See, this is, I was in a discussion last night, and they were talking about China. And I said, well, you know, China is an interesting test case for people who want to intervene and occupy. So the Japanese discovered when they entered China, there was nothing in China but Chinese. And they ended up with 1 million soldiers and administrators and bureaucrats stuck perpetually in China, dealing with what was a difficult and hostile population. So the Japanese discovered pretty quickly, this has been a huge mistake. The problem was that every time they tried to negotiate with Chiang Kai-shek, they couldn't come to an arrangement that would allow them to, quote unquote, leave with dignity. Chiang Kai-shek said, fine, get out of China. And they should have gotten out. And eventually that's what they did. But the problem was they wanted to do it in ways that would disguise the stupidity and idiocy of having gone in to begin with. This has a huge impact on all great powers that suffer from terminal cases of national narcissism. It also is a problem because people immediately assume that they have limitless power and influence. You never do. It doesn't matter who you are. And so all of these things have been learned the hard way in the past. But each time we engage in this, you have a new group of luminaries in Washington, D.C. who decide that this time it will be different and they will get everything right. And what's really disturbing is to listen to some of these retired officers who were part of this debacle and really actually privately knew better, come out publicly and say, oh, we should go back. We should go back and fix this. This is terrible. This is surrender. Well, first of all, what were you trying to win to begin with? Right. Nobody ever has a good answer. What are you winning? Where's the payoff? Of course, this is what the Japanese discovered in China. There was nothing to win. There was great value in seizing Malaya and Indonesia. At one point in 43, the Japanese were sitting on top of the largest concentration of rubber and oil in the world. It made infinite sense to go down there, but it made no sense whatsoever from a practical standpoint to go into China.
It reminds me of, I think, when the Nazis invaded, I think Sweden, didn't Winston Churchill say something to the effect, or great, more flies to the fly paper?
No, they didn't. Sweden was always pro-German, frankly, until the war was almost over. So were the Swiss. Okay. We have a lot of false impressions of what happened in Europe during World War II. No, I think there were some assumptions about the Germans in Russia. But the more information that we are discovering, and this is one of the chapters that I wrote in Margin of Victory about the Russo-German War. And the more we look at it, the more we discover that I think more than anything else, we defeated Germany and Russia. And the reason I say that is Lend-Lease, because there are very few people that understand that in July of 1941, Harry Hopkins was sent by FDR to meet with Stalin. And essentially, Stalin handed him a wish list of everything from aluminum to steel to weapons to tanks and aircraft. And we supplied these things in enormous quantities. When the Germans arrived in Stalingrad, they were stunned at the fact that they were overrunning positions that had thousands of US-made trucks and Jeeps. And frankly, people don't know this, but we also sent enormous numbers of Sherman tanks to Russia, but the Russians said, we will not accept any Sherman tanks unless they have diesel engines. So the Russians, or the Soviets, the communists, received all the Shermans with diesel engines. Our soldiers were given these damn things with gasoline engines, which is why they referred to the Sherman during World War II as the Zippo lighter. There's so much that went on during that war that it's hard to imagine. We really rescued the Soviet Union from certain destruction.
Yeah, in fact, it's my understanding no less than 3/4 of the entire Wehrmacht was fighting against the Soviets. I don't think the Americans really appreciate that. I mean, the bulk of the Germans were fighting this huge Soviet juggernaut. And it's just amazing. To me, the Eastern Front is one of the most fascinating wars in history. In fact, I saw a stat once that I think it was, if you killed 17,000 people per day, every day for 4 years, you would just have the casualties of the Russian front.
Well, we now know that the Soviets lost at least 40 million, or twice what they originally admitted. We also know that there were 1.5 million so-called Soviet citizens in the Wehrmacht. There were 750,000 Russians who effectively joined the Wehrmacht on the battlefield, 250,000 Ukrainians, and another 500,000 Turks, Armenians, Georgians, and others. This doesn't even begin to talk about the numbers of Lithuanians, Latvians, Estonians also, working with the Wehrmacht. It really was a crusade against communism. And the sad part is that Hitler would not simply turn this into a war of liberation. Even Himmler tried to convince him that, look, if you'll just let us take the Soviet prisoners of war, of which there were 3 million, we can field armies equipped with all of the captured Soviet equipment that will fight shoulder to shoulder with us to liberate the Soviet Union from communism. He wouldn't do it. So you had some of it, but it was very modest. So instead of just 1.5 million, there would have been 2 or 3 million people fighting against communism. And we don't understand the British General Staff, when you go through their papers during the Second War, which obviously this did not get into the chapter because it was beyond the purview of the book. From the very beginning, they were extremely, extremely concerned about Churchill's wholehearted support of communism and Stalin, pointing out that, frankly, from the standpoint of the British Empire, communism was a far greater threat to Britain than National Socialism. And Churchill discarded it through caution to the winds. He said, well, they're tying down 250 German divisions. Well, it's one thing to tie down 250 German divisions. It's quite another to enable the movement of tens of millions of Soviet troops into Europe. And unfortunately, that's what happens. And I think we all lost sight of the difference between tying down German forces and enabling the conquest of Central East Europe by communism, which of course then leaves us with another war to fight, doesn't it? An even more destructive, more costly war than the Second World War.